Alright guys, I hope you're doing well. I thought I'd do one more preset breakdown from the preset pack Prophecy for Phase Plant, because this is another different type of sound, completely different type of sound to the previous two videos where I did a respace and then a sub bass. This is a expressive, unique NEUROFUNK mid-bass growl, essentially. Alright, it's one of my favorites from the patch, that's why I wanted to talk about it, and it's called the Panda Dog. It sounds like this. In isolation. So I'm going to show you where the sound comes from, the main things that I did to achieve that sound. Okay, so without all of the effects turned on, it sounds like this. Okay, with all of the effects and no effects. So you can hear where the growl initially comes from, right? It comes from this. It comes from the movement in the wavetable. So, what I've chosen is I've created a wavetable, and then I've gone to the FM folder, and I've got the pair FM 2.1, and I've modulated it to go up from frame 4 up until plus 74 on this LFO here. And if it went up higher, it gets a bit screechy and too resonanty, But just within that range, it's sort of between a sine wave where it kind of starts off, and it just goes up enough to add some extra harmonics in without giving you all this new high end, So it's just balancing that sort of sine wave, slightly adding in the harmonics but not going too far. And there's just a lot of movement happening here on this LFO, yeah? You see the semitone is down here to minus 24. There's also some movement on the pitch. It's just going down minus 3. Oh, sorry, it's plus 3. Yeah, plus 3. And so that's another key thing, is having the pitch movement in there. If I take that off, doesn't have quite as much life to it, So the sound sort of pitches up 3 semitones and comes back down again already, right here in the oscillator. So the pitch moves up, and the frame position moves, so the wavetable position, so they're both important. Then I have this sine wave added in as well. This is just an analog sine wave, and this one, it doesn't have the pitch movement on, so it's almost like they detune a bit from each other, these two oscillators, so because they're both at minus 24, and this one obviously goes up 3 semitones, so it sort of detunes itself from the other one, so that creates already a bit of extra tension. Yeah, if I left it back where it was before, the tone isn't quite as interesting, so that pitch movement is super key. And yeah, if I take this down as well here, you've lost that growl. So that whole mid-bass character comes from the growl, which is done through the wavetable modulation here. Yeah, you can hear there's like some noise on top of this sine wave here, and that's from the sync mode. If I was to take off this LFO here from the sync and turn these guys down here, you basically got rid of, it's a little bit there still, but yeah, this kind of sort of high-end buzz is pretty much mostly coming from this sync down here, Someone let that sink in. So yes, the other thing to note is there's a little bit of frequency modulation from the wavetable going into the sine wave here, right? And it's really, really subtle. It only goes up 34% here, or 34 units. But that does, if I take that off, it adds a bit of padding and a bit of extra push and distortion to the whole thing. So it's quite useful because it gels things together and makes it all kind of a bit more aggressive. So also check here, the volume of the wavetable is a bit higher. That's where the main kind of growl mid-bass is coming from. And this flatter sine wave is a little bit lower in level here. So that's the setup basically. I know it's already quite complicated, and I haven't even told you about the LFO routing yet either. So the first LFO here is your main LFO, and this secondary one is just modulating the phase of the first one. So all it's doing is it's just changing the movement of the first one. Okay, so you see now where this line constantly skips around. That's because the position of LFO1 is being modulated by LFO2 here, you know? So to do that, you just set the output from this LFO to go to the phase of the first one and then spin it all the way around. And now it's more of a like unpredictable rhythm on the LFO. That's basically just the goal for doing that, you know? So it's an unpredictable movement on the LFO. That's all this one's used for, really, this LFO. It modulates like a tiny cut sort of filter position on one of the plugins, but it's kind of pretty random. It doesn't really do anything else apart from give this first LFO an unpredictable pattern, you know? But yeah, so that's it then. So that's the whole basis for the sound. And then as you kind of saw before, when I showed you the difference, you know, we got to get to that next, just through the effects, you know. But that's basically exaggerating everything that we created just with this part. Yeah, the growl and the bass and the kind of grit from the sync mode here. You know, this sync mode. It's a bit of movement on the LFO. It gives that sine wave a bit of a high end kind of buzz. So it's sort of the sine wave with the buzz, the wavetable moving to give you that growl, and the little pitch movement on it, and all on this kind of unpredictable LFO pattern. You know, that's the whole start of the sound, right? So then, one of the main things that already brings it to life is the distortion straight away, and this is with the shaper table. And this one is great because I spend quite a lot of time trying to find the best fit for the sound. And this one fell under the FM category again here. And so it's the FM folder, and then it's the GROWL FM1. All right? And it's quite nice as well because it starts off here on the shaper table. It's a bit like the wavetable. You can cycle between all of the kind of harmonic variations of the plugin here. And like this first one, it kind of starts off like a sine wave, you know? And again, this one here starts off like a sine wave, so it's relatively clean at the beginning. And then because I go up only a little bit, not all the way, just going into that, like a little bit into the chaos that you can see is kind of behind everything there, but not all the way through it. It allowed me to add on like that extra aggressive sort of high-end content into the sound already, you know? And what you can do with the smooth as well, when the smooth isn't turned up, you got even more of that high-end grit already coming in straight away from the distortion, you know? When you turn the smooth up, it gets rid of some of that high-end sort of aggression, and you can mix that in as well. So you see here, I've put it on the LFO. So I'm able to mix in some more of that high end, you know, along with when the LFO gets to the top, the smooth comes off a bit, and then it gets like a bit more aggressive, you know? So it's kind of doing two things. It's already moving into the chaotic kind of spectral distortion sound that's behind, you know, at the back of the wavetables here. And at the same time, we've also softened it and then we're modulating that softness to open up and give us a bit more of the raw signal at the top here again, you know? So that's basically all I've done for the shaper table, you know, but it already gave it like loads of mid-range and high-end content, you know? So it's all still kind of dry still, so a lot of the things next are going to be some stereo effects coming in, you know? First, the distortion, okay? And this has actually got a big movement on the mix, you can see here. So on the LFO, it will make the sound more dynamic. So as the LFO comes up, the mix and the distortion turns up, you get more volume and push, and it makes the whole sound have a bit more of a dynamic edge to it again. Okay, so because if it was just up, it would just always be loud. We don't have that shaped kind of volume perception that the LFO puts into it, you know. So it makes it more expressive when we do that. You know, we're using the distortion to give more of a interesting tone and volume and power, but it's done via the mix so that it's all dynamic and expressive as well, you know? It's a bit of spread on there as well. Then I've got a ring mod. This adds some noise in. And yeah, this is basically really, really important because I haven't put any white noise in beforehand, you know? So the white noise sort of comes in the signal chain here, and it also moves on the LFO. So you hear the noise kind of breathes along with what the bass is doing, you know? So yeah, the white noise just from the bandpass noise on the ring mod with the bias and rectifier and frequency all the way up and the spread, so it's nice and stereo. Okay, so we filled out the high end. Now I'm using the nonlinear filter to shape the sound and give a little bit more character again. So you see now we start to build in that shape by notching out some of the mid-range, and it's sort of around 360 hertz, and then the LFO movement, you know, is going up quite a fair bit as well. And so yeah, you can dial it into taste, but you know, I found that perfect spot right there, which kept that growl character alive, you know, that was in there. You almost hear it a little bit clearer now as well, you know? So listening to that growl that was originally kind of in the sound, and then, you know, emphasizing things to improve that always, that's the goal. Then the flanger was applied around 35%, and this is basically for stereo width and a little bit of a pitch variation. So yeah, if you turn it up, you can see just how stereo things become, and you can hear the subtle pitch variations as well. When you mix that in, the best of both worlds. Bit of extra stereo and a bit of variation, and still a lot of power in the mono because it's not mixed too high. Same thing with the comb filter, again mixed around 31% with the stereo mode. It's doing a similar thing to the flanger in terms of the fact it's adding extra stereo width and warmth and keeping the low end pretty intact. And yeah, we just modulate the cutoff position via this secondary LFO here. I'm not sure why I did it on that one instead of the other one, but there you go. So it just moves the frequency amount around a little bit, providing a little bit of movement in the comb filtered signal, you know, because the signal that's the signal. And we just mix that in 30%, you know. Now you've got a couple of reverbs coming in. You've got one here which is the white blur 50, which is really short and tight. It's only about 7%. It softens the sound a bit because it's quite aggressive even with the even with the shaper table having been smoothed out, there's still quite a lot of high-end sort of grit on the sound, and I would say it was even a bit too much still, you know. So the Convolver softens the whole high end of everything. That's the job for the Convolver, really, you know. And now this is another Convolver, but this one is a bigger room. So this one has a slight, it's still pretty tight, but it's like slightly larger than the other one. So you've got two extra sort of depth layers on the sound, you know. One really tight one and one slightly more open one. Yeah, that just sits around 18% or so. So again, just adds a little bit of extra stereo room sounds to the patch. Now here, we're doing sort of the opposite of a notch filter. We're doing a little boost with movement. So this is great as well, especially for the bass. You can like, you can hear the low mid-range becomes more impactful now and has even more of a dynamic edge to it and more push, you know, because I've boosted around 150 hertz and it moves as well. It goes up 18% or so. So you can imagine this sort of moving boost EQ in the low mids, which really, yeah, gives you more bass power, but in an expressive, moving way. Yeah, so it's not always just that we're overwhelming the low mids with, you know, loads and loads of content, you know, in one position. The fact that it moves, it gives you that movement through the frequency spectrum, so it becomes, you know, less overwhelming, and it's a, you know, you get that boost, but it's not, you know, tiring your ears in one particular area of the frequency spectrum for too long, you know. So like a moving boost, that's really great. Then I've got a high shelf boost, and this is something I do in a lot of patches, as you might have seen before. It's a similar thing with the boost, but we're just bringing up the high end in line with the LFO, you know. It's a little high shelf boost, dynamic, and then I think I've just got a little mid-side EQ going on here. This is the slice EQ. I guess I'd probably just put I'm not sure, you can double click it or something. It usually opens up on the side. I don't use this one so much. Oh yeah, right clicking here. Yeah, I think the stereo mode is on, so it's just cutting out some of the sides in the low end. Again, you can do this outside of phase plant as well if you need to. You know, a mid-side cut to make sure it's all clean in the low end. This is now just mixing thing. This is all just like final mixing and mastering things for the patch. A little bit of mid-side EQ, a tiny bit of extra high-end boost, a little low shelf, ducking some of the bass down a bit, just balancing the whole sound. You know, slightly more highs and slightly less lows. It just sounded a bit better like that, you know. Like the final mastering kind of thing for it. And then a cheeky little clipper at the end, boosting the whole thing up a little bit more. And then that's it, finished really. You've got some macros again, as always, and they're just quite simple ones. The slow just is the control of the, you know, the length of the wub, essentially. So you can have a slightly faster version if you like. But anyway, I was quite enjoying the slower version of the sound, you know. The tone, just shifting around very subtly a load of parameters like filter cutoff positions, the wavetable shape position. So you can kind of get more of a harmonic kind of edge to it like that, you know. Then we got the space, which is sort of giving us more of that reverb signal and more of some of the stereo effects. And then the bite as well, of course, just doing a bit of high end extra noise and distortion in case you want it even sort of brighter in your mix, you know. But that's the Panda Dog then, isn't it? It's a really nice sound, and yeah, yeah, it's just cool how you can go from a sound like that to a sound like this just through the effects chain, you know? And but it was sort of initially set up to go in that direction, you know, as I mentioned earlier, that, you know, modulating that wavetable position, you know, from that sine wave towards this kind of harmonic chaos, but not so far, you know, unlocked that kind of low mid-range growl idea already, you know, and then the pitch movement gave it a little bit more interest, and then we sort of beefed up the whole sound with another sub with a bit of noise on it, a bit of sort of like a buzz sound on it, and then from those ingredients, the rest of the sound was birthed out of that, you know, and this plugin here as well, this shaper table, doing most of the heavy lifting in terms of adding all the grit and aggression to the growl, you know. So there you have it, my G's. I hope that was a little bit helpful and insightful, and yeah, it can kind of help to, you know, have a bit of an idea of how you want to start the sound off. Like, I know it's quite a simple one, you know, with just a wavetable and a sine wave and a little wub, you know, but that, you know, keeping it simple here sometimes, and then you going really overboard with loads of effects, you know, providing you're doing it in a clever way, you know, you can start to create those sounds a bit more in line with what you are kind of imagining, you know. So if you imagine you want like a big fat neuro bass growl, you can start off with the simple ingredients, like just a little growling kind of sine wave thing that's just quite subtle, and then just trying to exaggerate that sort of subtle sine wave growl through all of the distortion, you know. So anyway, there you go, my G's. That's the Panda Dog. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Massive thanks to everyone who bought a copy of Prophecy already, and it's still on sale until the end of the week. If anyone else wants to grab one, use your discount code Prophecy, all caps. And that's it for today. Check out the other links down below for my preset packs, one-on-one lessons, mastering services, and my Patreon Discord community. And hit the like button, comment down below, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace out.